Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of my independent audiobook creation series. This one is going to cover the software tool chain that I use, starting with the recording, going through to editing, and then into filtering, which will wind up with what I call a master, which is going to be the sort of the end product before I do any final tweaking and get it ready for submission to the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is the ACX. So without getting too far behind here, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing, of course, that we need to do is we need to record the audio. I do this in Sound Studio. The first thing I do, of course, is create a new new mono file. I do it in mono because the Audiobook Creation Exchange actually recommends mono files for audiobook creation. You can create stereo. The end result, of course, is going to be an MP3 file or files that you submit to the ACX people as part of that part of the process. But if they're stereo files, you're going to wind up losing left and right channel anyway when they encode them at ACX. They don't, as far as I know, they don't do any stereo output regardless. And since it's just easier to give it to them in mono, that's what I start with. I start with a mono file, and that's where we're at. So I've got a mono file going on here. I just start recording. I'm actually going to record. You're going to see a recording of what I'm doing right now, and then once I've recorded a few seconds, so you can see this process, I'm going to open up a file that I had recorded earlier. It was actually a recording from the audiobook recording session. So. First, open it up, create a new mono file, click the record button, and then wait a few seconds. Now, what I do when I wait this early time period here is I'm actually letting it absorb some of the room noise so that I can later on edit it out, or filter it out, I should say. So we'll go ahead and stop that because we don't want to watch that go the whole time. So all I did was I just started the recording. I gave it a few seconds. In fact, almost, probably 4 seconds worth of room tone at the beginning. And what that room tone is, and that's actually a term that they use at ACX, that is just literally the sound of the room. We want to make it as quiet as we can. And so it's going to be something we need to have at the beginning and the end of each of the files that we submit. So it's good to have a recording of it anyway, but it comes in handy for us after a little bit because it's going to help us to filter out the noise. So I don't want to save this. This is not going to be something that that we need to keep for later. But I am going to go ahead and just open up open up a file that I have had in the past already. So let's go to this audiobook. Now what I do is I create a file system structure that has each step of the chain that I'm going to use for the process. And so the raw recordings themselves, like I would make here, go into the raw recordings file or folder, and then I break them out by which chapter it is. So chapter 1, part 2, let's go with chapter 2. So chapter 2, take 2, just for the heck of it. Let's open that guy up, see what he looks like. So you're going to see a couple of things right away. First of all, this is the whole file. This is the entire thing. And here, that's a mistake. That's my little snap that I make next to the microphone. It sounds like this. And it looks like this. It makes it very easy to see later on. So I can see right away 1, 2, 3, 4 places where I made what I think are pretty easy to see mistakes here. So I'm just going to kind of go ahead and open this up. So you can see that's what it looks like here. What I do now is I'm going to go ahead and play it. You're not going to be able to hear it when you are watching this video, but I listen to it and make the snap. And then I took a deep breath and I waited for a second. I'm going to have to filter that out. So what I do now is I take this file and I edit out that portion of the audio that is a mistake. Just highlight it and delete it. Now, I go ahead and listen to it for a second, and I'm going to delete a little more so it sounds a little more natural when it makes that transition. So we did that. We got that. Here's another one here that I could edit out. I've actually stepped through most of this already, so I'm just going to go ahead and close this out. I'm not going to save it because I've actually made the edits I already need to make. So now what I'm going to do, I don't necessarily want to save that either, but that's okay. So what I want to do next is I need to go to Audacity, and in Audacity I'm going to open one of the files that I had created earlier. So here's the audiobook. Here's the Ready for Audacity, Chapter 2, and let's go with Chapter 2, Section 2. This is the original. This is the one that I edited before of the same area. So I'm going to open that up so we can take a look at it. It's going to open up in its own little track here in Audacity. And so the very first thing that I do is I kind of expand this out a little bit so I can see some more of the front. Okay, so I know where the sound is. I know how much I know kind of where the transition point is. And so I just kind of edge it off just a little bit here and then highlight all of that front part. Go into the noise reduction, get noise profile, and what that does is it tells Audacity this is what noise sounds like in this file. So now I can do edit, and where's my select all? Select all, there it is. Select the entirety of the file and do the noise reduction again, except this time instead of pushing get noise profile, I'm going to want to click OK. Now with that in mind, I recommend that you experiment with these sliders, how much noise reduction, how many decibels it goes down, how sensitive it is, how many frequencies you're going to smooth through, or how many bands you're going to go through, whether you want to reduce or residue. These are all things that you will want to experiment with on your own files as you're going through, because you'll learn a lot more about what it sounds like with your microphone and in your recording situation than you will by me sitting here and kind of stepping through it. So what I'm going to do is I know that this is a good setting for me, so I'm just going to click OK and let it do noise reduction. It's going to take a few seconds to get that done. Once it finishes, the noise levels in this file have now been reduced by about 20 decibels. So the next thing I do is I eliminate most of the head and most of the tail, just because they're not very long. We've already used them for what we need them for in this particular instance, and that is just to give us a kind of a background of what the noise sounds like. So the next thing I do now, there's a couple of ways you can go about this. One is to compress and then reverb or echo, and the other one is to do it in the other way. Do it reverb or echo first and then compress. What I have found is that it seems to work best for my recording situation to compress first. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to want to compress the audio file. Now, audio compression, we talked a little bit about it before. It's different from file compression. What audio compression basically does is it takes the soft parts and makes them a little bit louder. It takes the loud parts and makes them a little bit softer. Our threshold here at negative 20 decibels means that anything that is at 20 decibels or louder is going to get attenuated at a rate of 4:1. That's what that ratio is, okay? So the attenuation starts at 20 decibels. Anything that is above 20 decibels, so the threshold at negative 20 is going to reduce, for every 1 decibel of loudness, it's going to reduce it by 4 decibels. So you're going to wind up, anything that is at, say, negative 12 is going to wind up at negative 18. That's that 4:1, because you're up by 8. It's going to bring it down. It's going to be 8-2. So instead of it being 8 decibels above the threshold, it's only going to be 2 decibels above the threshold when you get finished. The noise floor is the level at which it's not going to increase any soft sounds anymore. Once it hits negative 50, it's going to assume that any of the noises or any of the sound that it hears at lower than negative 50 is noise, and it is not going to amplify it at all. The ratio tells you by how much it's going to, how many decibels of increase or decrease it's going to either attenuate or amplify. And then the attack time and release time. The attack time has to do with how soon after it hits the threshold is it going to actually start to compress the sound. And the release time is how many seconds after the threshold is, after it gets down below that threshold, how long after that threshold it's going to release the compression again. This is all really kind of complicated, and I don't understand it quite well enough yet. I don't think to really explain it in a more simple way, than that. Unfortunately, I'm still learning this just kind of as much as some other people might be as well. So the other thing to note here is this makeup gain. The makeup gain for 0 dB after compressing means that once it gets up to the compression, once it makes all these peaks attenuated and brings them down toward the threshold, once it brings those more silent parts up and brings them up again, and once it increases their amplifies their sound, then it's going to take whatever those peaks are, and it's going to take the whole sound and move it up so that the peaks are at 0 decibels. Okay, I'm going to cancel this just for a second. I'll show you what we're looking at. This ACX Check plugin will compare the file against the known technical parameters for the Audiobook Creation Exchange. And as we look at it, I'm just going to kind of show this to you. So the processing is done, right? So the peak level here, it technically passes, but -14 is way too low for that. But it doesn't matter because the RMS, that root mean squared, that's kind of that overall sound level, it doesn't meet the technical requirements anyway. We've got a really good noise floor here. That means that when we shift up the sound, that noise floor is almost certainly going to stay low below the noise floor requirement for ACX, which is -60 decibels. It has to be, the noise floor can be no louder than -60.0 decibels. So that's what we're looking at here. There is a little bit of a DC offset. That's actually going to probably get accentuated when we do the compression here in a second, but we can fix that in just a bit. So we know that our RMS level is way too low. Our peaks, the highest peak that we're looking at is at -14.8 decibels, and that's all right for now. It doesn't matter. So we're going to go in here and do the compression. I'm going to do that compression, -20, noise floor -50 with a 4:1 ratio. And watch these waveforms. Watch what happens to them after we get finished here. It's going to take it a few seconds. And you saw how much louder it got almost immediately. Then, with the ACX check, we can see the RMS level, the peaks level. The peaks are going to be too high because they're at 0 decibels, but that's okay because we're going to fix that in a minute. But this RMS level, even after that jump, it jumped it up almost almost by 10 decibels. And so that's good. That's okay. We can deal with that. This -82 for the noise floor is really, really good. That means that the noise, where we can start to hear noise is way low. And it also, you see that DC offset came up by quite a bit, by a whole factor of 10. So after a factor of 20. So anyway, this we're going to have to fix some of these, but that's okay because the biggest issue was we wanted to make sure we got some sound to work with. So we got that up. That's good to go now. So what I do next, and it depends on, this is not my absolute final, but this is something that I do. Once I've gotten it kind of once I've got the compression done, I'll go ahead and go through and do a reverb. And that seems to work pretty well for my scenario. Once I've got the reverb done, then I'm going to go in and actually compress it again. And this time when I compress it, I'm actually going to compress with a higher threshold. You might even consider going as high as -12 here to only attenuate those sounds that come up above the -12 threshold. Whatever works for you. Like I said, you're going to want to experiment with these to get a good setting for your situation. So I'm going to apply this again. This is going to go through, and you're going to see it's going to change it yet again. Much significant change in the sound quality. Now, it is not going to pass ACX check because of the peaks. The peaks are still at 0 decibels, but that's actually okay yet. Not worried about that. What I am worried about is making sure I still have a good sounding audio when we hit that RMS. Anything between -18 and -23 decibels is good to go in this root mean squared or RMS level for ACX. The peak level is still too high, and the DC offset is not at 0, and it's probably not going to be perfect, but we are going to fix that. And we fix that with normalization. Normalize to put the DC offset back at 0. Now what that basically means is that the way that the waveform deflected off of negative and positive in terms of this, you see there's a line here in the middle, that's at 0.0. And we don't want that to be to be too far off of that 0.0, either in the negative or the positive deflection direction. And the reason for that is because if it does, it can induce noise problems, like for example clicks or hums that are audible when you listen to it in your headphones, or when you have your speakers going. So we want to get rid of that if we can, or at least as much of it as possible. So we're going to normalize it to center the DC offset on zeros, but I am not going to normalize maximum amplitude. I'm actually going to do a different tool for this. So I'm going to remove that DC offset, let it go, and then we can analyze it again. In the ACX check, we'll see that this is a much that the DC offset is actually going to be very good here. It removed almost all of it. It took it back down to that 0. Whatever, how many 6 zeros, 5 zeros, 4% that we had originally, which is perfectly fine. Really, you're not going to be able to detect any clicks from that at this level. So, okay, so the last step that I take here is I do a limiter. Now, I run the limiter. This is the setup that I'm using right now. I limit it to -3.5 decibels. And the reason that I do that instead of the -3.00 is because that gives me just a little bit more headroom that I can use later if I need to continue to filter something. Like, for example, in one of the sections of Chapter 1, there's a part where one of the things that happens is broadcast over a radio. It's broadcast over the military radio frequency that we were tuned into on the tanks during our gunnery practice. And so there was an announcement that was made that came over the radio, and I actually use a filter to simulate radio transmission. So it alters the quality of my voice and stuff like that. It makes it sound like it's being transmitted over a radio. But I don't do that in Audacity because I don't have a filter for that. But what I can do is I can run that filter relatively confidently because I have a little bit of headroom, and it's not going to stretch up over that -3 decibel limit that we have for ACX. So I'm going to run that. You're going to notice, watch these waveforms here when I do that. It's going to run through, and you're going to see some of them are going to squish back toward the middle just a little bit. Now when we run the analysis, we should have passes ACX across the board. Okay, so passes ACX, passes ACX, passes ACX. Those are all very, very good numbers. The RMS -22.4. Now, to be honest with you, I am not sure what the difference is between RMS and RMS-A. I don't know whether this is a root mean squared and this is like this is the root mean squared of an average or something. I mean, to me, this is an average already, so I don't know what that is, and they're not measuring it against the ACX requirements anyway. So that's a pretty good set of numbers. Now, the DC offset here jumped up again because of the limiter that we put on it, but I think that we'll be fine for this. This is really, really low, so I'm not going to be too concerned about it. So we got several things done here. We got compression, we got reverb, we got normalization for the DC offset, we got limiter so that the peaks are not higher than the ACX requirements. Our project was at 44,100 hertz, or 44.1 kilohertz. This all looks very good, right? So at this point now, what I can do is save this file, and of course I have already made this file. I've already done the output on this one from before. But if I need to now take this take this into, say, Final Cut Pro and layer music underneath it, I can do that. I'm not going to show that in this video right now because we're already over 20 minutes and people are probably nodding asleep. But I am going to actually add a sort of an addendum video to this probably tomorrow that will kind of help show you the next stage of what I do. I just don't want this to run over too long. So in any event, that's the tool chain that I'm using right now, at least to get it from recording to editing through the filtering and then ready to master. In the very next video that I do, I will show you how I use the tool that I use, which is Final Cut, to do some of the layering and some of the other filtering that I need. If you're not using that tool, there are others out there that will allow you to do this. And in Audacity, actually, I believe you can also do the same thing. You can create individual tracks. You can go in here, track, make a new one, and that will show you, this will just create a new track and it will play both tracks simultaneously. So that's one way that you could do that in Audacity as well. So anyway, thank you for watching. Hopefully I didn't bore you quite to sleep with this. But then look for another video tomorrow where I'm going to take the next step from this one and do a little bit of layering. And I'm going to use use Final Cut Pro as my tool for that. So thanks for watching. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. And if you did go to sleep, hopefully this will wake you up and you can get on with the rest of your day. Thanks. We didn't get much sleep. The arrival at the AA, or assembly area, was approximately 02:30, and sunrise in the desert there was around 05:30 or so. The squadron command staff gathered, selected a location for our base camp, and we executed a short movement to what would become Base Camp Bessie, named after one of the regiment's earliest Medal of Honor winners in 1877. We didn't get much sleep. The arrival at the AA, or assembly area, was approximately 02:30, and sunrise in the desert there was around 05:30 or so. The squadron command staff gathered, selected a location for our base camp, and we executed a short movement to what would become Base Camp Bessie, named after one of the regiment's earliest Medal of Honor winners in 1877.